Well, it's come around full circle, huh? I couldn't live with my own failure, so where to bring it? Back to this. Back when I made my original P4 Golden video, which is very bad in hindsight, don't watch it. It's fucking awful. Something I seem to gloss over quite a bit is the characters themselves. In retrospect, some of them were kind of baseline analysis, some being compared to being as non-existent as Dojima coming home at a reasonable hour. So let's change that. I want to talk about a party in the way that I talked about the characters in the Dragon Quest XI video, and even some more important characters, as I feel they add on to many aspects of the game, either introduced to the plot or, through other characters to begin with. I'm going to tackle this with the party first, then social links or miscellaneous characters, and they'll be talked about more and less in an order they're introduced in the story. Kinda. I don't know, you'll figure it out. I won't be mentioning any of the extra stuff from Golden, so sorry Marie fans, you're not getting your chance. But despite that, I did play Golden on my Switch because I wanted to. I will not apologize for this having zero structure whatsoever. This is just how my brain works, and I wanted to just ramble on, so I figured make a video about it. Well, got a lot of ground to cover. Oh, and of course, spoilers for the whole game. The doi. And now we're on the case. Because it's a mystery. Yosuke is one of the first people you meet in Inaba. Initially getting his balls busted, and then later getting his head stuck in a trash can, because funny. His family runs Junes, the local department store, which is basically just a Walmart in the small rural town. He helps his folks from time to time in between school, and he tries to balance them both and eventually the murder case on top of it. Yosuke's a very brash and free-spirited kind of guy, but he's also an idiot. A very shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy, but he's got a heart of gold. At the beginning of the game, he's got a crush on one of the other workers, Saki Konishi. But once she gets murked and he gets dragged into the TV with us, he has to confront various emotions firsthand. Feelings such as the girl he likes finding him annoying, and the overlapping feelings of Junes being a source of misery for her and basically everybody else who's trying to run a business here. He initially uses this as a source of hatred towards the town itself, regretting decisions that were unfortunately out of his control. Now, something that I find very interesting is the shadow forms, which are the boss fights, or at least for the party members. They're interesting as they reflect some of the traits in the characters themselves. Now, of course, I'm no expert in this, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, and I'm going to use my interpretation of what I feel that these sort of represent. While Yosuke's shadow is very weird on the surface, I like to interpret it as Yosuke thinking he's a hero of sorts. With the top half, looking like your typical Sentai Ranger that Japanese boys find cool. Or I guess men, people like Kamen Rider. As for the frog thing, I don't know, I like to see it as a symbol of Yosuke feeling like a frog hopping from one place to another. Going from the city to the boonies. And then, like most characters, once Yosuke learns to accept that side of himself he doesn't want to be shown, you don't really get too much until the social link starts. You start to see these pretty infamous for things around town, being known as the kid from Junes, and being the one that people complain to when it comes to work grievances. Yosuke takes a lot of this shit around town due to his parents being the managers. He even gets flack from his parents, always asking for help from him or other people since they're short-staffed. Through all this, he remains vigilant in his mission to stop the murders and, be the best person he can be. Not just to get that off his shoulder, but, to avenge the girl from earlier. It's all that's on his mind, and he won't stop until it's all said and done. It's really not until Yosuke snaps that he realizes how much he's actually holding in, and he's not really coping with it very well. He hates the town, he hates the people, and especially hates himself for how powerless he feels in a general sense. Not being able to handle situations at work to not being able to help Saki. He feels like he can't help anyone. But after his major venting session, he starts to realize that he actually loves the town, which I know sounds crazy, but he loves it not for the town itself, but for the people in it. He's learned to appreciate those around him, or at least the ones special to him. Even if things aren't ideal, as long as you have what's important to you, it's tolerable. Even if it seems a little all over the place, it's a nice story about making the best of a bad situation. He shouldn't feel bad about things he can't control. After that, Yosuke continues to be the ultimate bro, going ride or die the whole way through the game. He's essentially your mouthpiece, saying things or agreeing when you can't say a word. Even if he can be a bit cruel and blunt in certain situations, I love this boy. He's a true homie. He's one of my favorite partner characters. Hell, he even calls you partner, and there's nothing cooler than that. I don't know, Yosuke's fantastic. He's a great guy. I love him. We meet Chie roughly around the same time we meet Yosuke and Yukiko, as they're all friends, or maybe just acquaintances to each other. She's your typical tomboy character, wearing a sports jacket and a short bob cut. She loves athleticism and meat. Or maybe I just described Akihiko. Honestly, I can't tell anymore, especially with the spin-offs. Chie is another brash character, being one to often butt heads with Yosuke any chance they get, since their personalities clash so much. It's once we get to Yukiko's castle that we get some more interesting thoughts on Chie as a person. Despite being the one to take charge amongst her and Yukiko, she has a bit of a superiority complex, seeing Yukiko as a means to an end and a reason to not feel bad for herself. Since Chie is the more confident of the two. She often sees Yukiko as a helpless little girl who won't be able to do anything without her. But it also kind of goes both ways as well, as Chie also thinks that she can't do anything without Yukiko, It's kind of a weird thing. The shadow itself does a good job reflecting, at least the first part, sporting a design that's part dominatrix and part executioner. Sitting on top of a set of schoolgirls, the mask hiding who she really is. But in the end, she really does care for her friend, and it's honestly kind of sweet. The rest of the game, and to be honest, her social link doesn't do too much for her character. Chie's main arc of the social link is that aside from being sporty meat-eating tomboy, she's got a bit of a savior complex. No matter man, woman, child, small dog, freaky homunculi, she wants to get strong and save as many people as she can. That's why she trains all the time. It helps get her focus away from her own insecurities. Classic defense mechanism. I enjoy Chie, but she has a problem that I feel like a game that Persona 5 has a problem with, and that's forgetting to develop characters in a meaningful way. Honestly, I guess with that comparison, Makoto and Chie have a very similar social link. They're great characters, I love them both, but man, I can't really defend the lack of development that they both have. Because honestly, her real personality traits are she likes meat, she's always ready to throw hands, and every now and then pays attention to the conversation, when it comes to the actual mystery going on. Arguably, she's more hot-headed than someone like Yosuke or Kanji. She does have her own fair bit of outbursts, probably more than anybody else, which is very interesting to think about. It's not that I hate her, I just wanted more from her, When Yukiko is introduced, she's kind of portrayed as a bit of a prim and proper princess, which makes a lot of sense since she's the heir of the Amagi Inn, a place that's great for tourism. It's very refined, but every now and then can let loose and laugh. Then the fan base likes to pretend that that's the worst thing in history. One of the first things we see with her is something called the Amagi Challenge, a game where the boys in school try and just ask her out, and that's pretty much it. She's garnered a bit of a reputation of turning boys down, probably because she doesn't have time for it. And, well, then we get to her dungeon, where inside, Yukiko hosts a little game show of sorts, hoping to find a man! Like she's on the latest season of Desperate Hotel Wives. Dressed like, you guessed it, a princess. Living in a giant castle. As we kinda find out, she sees the inn as a castle or more like a prison. Stuck there for life, as the responsibility of her being the next manager is being pushed on her day by day. It's reflected more in her shadow form, which takes the form of a bird in a cage. Ooh, symbolism. Kind of the more obvious symbolism, but it works. It's also a phoenix, which helps with the fire aspect, so I don't know, I like that too. With this form, she's constantly waiting for her prince to show up, but also you gotta think that she's not really making an effort to find that prince, but I also kind of get it. She's busy running the inn and Some might just use her for her connections to their own benefit, not really loving her for who she is, but instead as the pretty manager of the famous Amagi Inn. And it's even more famous with all the stuff related to the murders happening there. Not many people outside of maybe a couple friends and family see her as a real person and see her as just a worker. And really a stone-faced woman thanks to the Amagi challenge rumors. But once we start her social link, we find out that she's kind of miserable. She wants to leave Inaba and find her own way through life, not be held down by the inn her family runs. And to be honest, she seems pretty convinced on it. Starting by researching job licenses, she also learns to cook since, that's an essential starting tool to surviving. And the whole arc ends up kind of being partly about this cooking aspect, since that's one of her weaker sides. As we go through, we learn of recent struggles of the inn since the initial case came about. Tabloids and the paparazzo always want the latest scoop. There's also people wanting to renovate the place, but Yukiko's mom stands her ground and wants to keep it the same as is and as it's always been. It's tradition. But that tradition is also why she wants to leave the town. She wants to break the traditional cycle and do something for herself for a change. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, but she ends up going back and becoming manager anyway. And yeah, I'm getting to that, so shut it. It's not till later ranks that we learn of the different things that the workers of the inn have done. They help her learn the skills she wants to. What are the guys doing it for a boy she likes? Because, of course they do. It's not till rank 8 that Yukiko stands up against media vultures harassing the inn, and then soon realizes that maybe staying wouldn't be so bad after all. Especially after all the help she's received, she feels a little guilty. And while it's not outright stated, I feel like Yukiko takes on the responsibility, not only as thanks to the other workers, but to change it into something that she can be proud of. She's not really doing it for the family, it's more for herself, and I can respect that. Outside of that, she doesn't really have too much going on. Yukiko's kind of the more sensible one before Naoto shows up, and aside from that, she's kind of the one who laughs at all the dumb jokes in the game. But, if you learn to laugh again, you'd be like this too. If we're counting things in the laugh department, she certainly scored big.
Come on, can't we give it a rest with the whole scoring thing?
Kanji is an interesting case. I feel like out of all the party members, he's the most understood by most players, aside from Naoto, but trust me, we'll get to that later. So let's start from the beginning. We don't actually meet Kanji like how we meet others. Not in school, but we first hear of him on TV, where there's reports of an incident with a biker gang, initially signaling that he's trouble a little bit. Classical Japanese delinquent with bleached hair and sporting a jacket with a tank top and a rough way of speaking. We then see him around part of town, and as we try to get closer to learn more about the guy, we really get nothing. He seems intimidated, or for some reason thinks that we find him weird, and gets really defensive about that. It's not until he appears on the Midnight Channel and we enter his dungeon that we see why. His other self is a more effeminate, flamboyant guy, flirty to the max, which all the people with more than 2 brain cells and chronically online would call problematic. Anyways, this place is a bathhouse, generally considered taboo and covered in a steam of secrets, or something like that. I don't know, I'm not a smart guy. And when we get to the top, we find our boy in a fundoshi, which I think that's what it's called. He's just letting his junk hang out. The other Kanji just gets more and more defensive by the second, wanting to beat the shit out of him. And thank God he does. The shadow form is a wonderful representation of his current feelings overall, I like to say. See, it's mostly a masculine figure with more effeminate details, and I like to think that it and the game pulls a kind of bait and switch a little bit. Once we beat the boss, we find that he's struggling with something within himself, a feeling that most have considered to being gay, but I feel it's a little bit more different. He struggles with knowing what it means to be a man, or I guess based on what the stereotypical traditional ideals of a man are. He was bullied as a kid just about by everyone for things we'll definitely get into later. You can kind of relate with it because, what is he supposed to be? He doesn't entirely know. But again, we'll get into that later. A lot of his stuff connects to his social link, trust me. And once we're out, Kanji starts to actually go to school and hang out with us more. And this is where I find his character the most interesting. Kanji's social link has us encountering a little boy that we help out. When we first meet, when Kanji has to go to the hospital having a scare with his mother, you start to hear about a bit of a softer side. Kanji's a bit worrisome of hospitals since his father died there. Once he heard his mom was at one, he's understandably worried. It takes a bit of time before he admits it, but, homeboy was scared. Something that the persona, get it? Yeah. Something that the persona he shows off doesn't really grant him a chance to say. Yeah, Kanji's tough guy act is just that, an act. He doesn't like stereotypical man things like sports and beer with crab cakes or something like that. Or he honestly prefers bacon and having a nice cup of tea. Things which, during the time that the game came out, both in Japan and in the States or anywhere else, was seen as feminine. Shit, I know that if you grew up during that time, you'd be called gay or queer straight up. Or, that...
A mighty faggot!
Point is, Kanji's not a normal man, but one made by the environment around him. We learned that he once helped a girl by fixing her backpack strap, then some other girls saw it and mocked her for it. Kanji, being young and impressionable, saw this and thought he did something wrong. He was also bullied on other occasions for his multiple interests in more girly things, so he had to change, and really not in a good way. He adopted the biker facade because that's what he thought a real man was. Moving forward, we find the little boy from the hospital crying because he borrowed a doll from a classmate, and some other kids saw it and wanted to tease him with it, so they thought it'd be a good idea to have the doll thrown in the river. Kanji, being the great guy he is, not wanting the boy to go through the same thing, decides to hop into the river and find it. But to no avail. He then offers to make the little kid a new one. When we see them both next, we find that the boy's mom saw the new doll and liked it, as well as other people around town who wanted one. Kanji's absolutely dumbfounded this, because the whole time he thought what he was doing was bad, but it was just an isolated incident. Kids can be cruel, and oh hey, an Akinari reference. Over time, he starts to take more pride in who he really is as a person. Even his mom starts to see a change for the positive. When the cops stop him for thinking he's the bully from Chie's social link, his mom comes to defend him, and even Kanji accepts it. Even if the world doesn't accept him, he starts to realize that it doesn't matter. There's a really great part in his rank 9 where Kanji talks about some words his dad said that are honestly really powerful, and honestly, I'm just gonna play the clip because I can't do it any justice.
Dad told me something right before he died. If you're a man, you have to become strong. Felt like he was telling me I wasn't a real man. Pissed me off. So I changed my looks and pushed myself away from people. Fighting gangs, thinking I was protecting Mom, trying to catch this killer. I thought all of that was how I was becoming strong. That I was really making up for all the trouble I caused. I was drunk off my power. But that wasn't it. That ain't what Dad meant. I still don't really get what being strong means, but I'm gonna start by not lying to myself. No more being scared of everyone, hiding my hobbies, staying away from people. Anytime, any place, I'm gonna bust right through as my own self. That's the way to deal with that other me in the TV world. As long as there's someone like that snot-nosed kid to accept me, I ain't afraid of nothing.
Kanji, honestly, in the main story is kind of just a meathead. He's really oblivious at points, but he's still able to understand a good chunk of what's going on. And he's a bit of a punching bag early on for Yosuke. But deep down, he's a deep and underappreciated character. He's my favorite in the whole game. I love his story arc. And in some ways, I can kind of relate to him a bit in certain aspects that I won't divulge into here, but don't worry about that. But honestly, I've never seen a more underplayed party member than Kanji, but oh, we'll get to that eventually. Rise is probably the saddest plot of all the party members in my opinion, and on initial playthroughs I severely underrated her entire character. But now I'm here to rectify that a bit. We meet Rise in a very similar vein to how we get to Kanji. She's a pop star in a small town, nowhere to be seen. Even though Pop Idol's face would be hard to hide, We end up finding her at a local tofu place that her family owns, shaking off any allegations of it being her as well as Special Agent Joryu. We don't really care much about her until she goes missing and appears on the Midnight Channel like everyone else, but here, Rise decides to get a little freaky naughty. Her whole dungeon's decked out like a strip club, down to bass-heavy music, ugly as sin lights, and stripper poles in a few of the rooms. Risei's Shadow's movements are very seductive and sultry, which I'm told is supposed to be indicative of the idol industry, as they basically whore you out as a sex symbol after a certain point. Feel free to correct me on this. I know very little, but I mean, creepy men and the types of outfits they wear, I don't think I'm too far off. And honestly, it makes me uncomfortable the entire time for that very reason that it's based in real life. That's why it sucks. And after being interrupted by the worst boss in a clearly peak game, Rise starts to show up at school and joins the investigation team as our navigator. Risei's social link is pretty sad and it gets more depressing as it goes. The main crux of the situation being her old manager showing up and wanting Rise to come back as the idol Rosette. But she's done with that life and wants to be a normal girl. This has been easier said than done when people recognize her only as Rosette, not Rise Kujikawa the person. But through it all, she's convinced about not having regrets and being happy with her choice as she moves on. It's not until we start to hear about a new phase from Risei's company, Konami Mashita. When we hear about her, we see different people talking about how Konami's so much better than Rosette, not faking it or like an act, which is clearly BS since it's the idol industry, and no matter who, it's just an act, as this pointed out by Rise herself. It's getting more defensive than normal. It's not until towards the end that we start to see her true feelings. When her manager shows up again and tries to offer her one last chance to come back, Rise says no and then is essentially told, "Cool, now that you aren't coming back, we could just be done. It's all about Konami. Bye." This is soul-crushing as Rise starts bawling, realizing the gravity of the situation, feeling like absolute shit. Like she wasn't good enough to be Rosette, and now she feels she's not even good enough to be Rise. She continues to wonder why he even spent time with her. She's not used to people liking her for the person she really is. So used to putting up a mask to get those around to like her even. Something that I feel many people can relate to and have experienced before. Sometimes they still experience it and people just don't show it. This aspect makes her honestly one of the more underrated social links of the party members. She eventually does come back to becoming an idol again after some deliberation, hopefully getting her chance in the spotlight. She goes back to being an idol because she wants to show the world that even though she's Rosette, she can still be Rise, wanting them to be one and the same, instead of two separate entities, which I kind of respect after another playthrough and seeing it. Actually very heartwarming and endearing when you think about it. That's basically it for the social link, as Rise is now super proud of who she's become and, learned to open up a bit more. Throughout the rest of the game, she's kind of one of the three heads of the investigation for the rest of it, and especially helpful inside the shadow world whenever you're searching for people. Before I did kind of just boil her down as being a thirsty chick, and she does have a bit of those moments where she does want to cuddle against the main character. But I feel like it's not as much as I initially thought, so I apologize to Rise for misjudging her. I don't know, she's not that bad. You just gotta give her a chance. Oh boy, this is gonna be a fun yet horrifying talk. Let's talk about Best Girl. Fight me. You actually already know Naoto if you've been paying attention throughout the game. She's appeared many times throughout, labeled as a boy. Having a very stoic and stone-faced personality with an outfit more, fitting of a Japanese boy. Very much reminded me of something like a Detective Conan type thing, or I guess a modern Sherlock Holmes type look, doing a little investigating on their own, and confronting the investigation team on multiple occasions with the same standoffish attitude with one goal in mind, and that's to solve the case herself. She then shows up on TV, which always shows bad news, and once in the dungeon, it's just portrayed as a creepy, like, 1930s science lab. We find out that Naoto's a girl and deep down resents the things heard by other officers. They think she's too immature and finds a child prodigy humiliating to them, so she tries to act more like an adult. It doesn't help that in a male-oriented workforce, she was born a girl. If Naoto was neither of these, then she believes it'd be easier to get by. Mainly the fact of being female being a big point of contention regarding the workforce all around the world, basically. And now, I gotta address the Gira Makala in the room. Naoto is not trans. As a hetero white man, I can't say too much about this, but while I feel that some parts of this can relate to those who have experienced / currently going through / have had thoughts about a transition, Naoto herself is not. It's more of a matriarch type of deal. I want to preface that I don't have a problem with the trans folks. A few good friends of mine are, and they're good people. I just have a problem with idiots who don't understand the story and saying bullshit that isn't true for a game they clearly didn't play without Subway Surfers on the bottom screen, or that music used for every clip of House, or what is that show, The Rookie? The one with the cops? I've been dealing with it for years. Finally had to get it out. Anyways, I kind of like Naoto's shadow design. It's simple and to the point. Whereas it looks like a robot, that's only half of it covered. The robot part, I feel, being based on the fun detective and probably superhero sci-fi stories she used to read as a kid. The other half, I can only assume, just represents her. And the dichotomy she feels of being two different people, emphasizing the two halves. Naoto then starts to accept her identity as a person, because even if she was born a woman and is young now, that's who she is, and she shouldn't entirely let what other people say in her career define her as a person. She ends up becoming the true driving force of the team and the investigation for the rest of the game. Since before, they were just kind of lucky that they've got this far, but now they have a real detective to help solve the crimes. Okay, social link time. This is a fun one. Naoto's S-Link starts with her receiving a calling card from someone addressed as Phantom Thief. The card details that stuff have been stolen from the Shirogane estate, the residency of Naoto's family, with servants and everything. Naoto sees this as a challenge before realizing something important. During this mini-investigation, we find various tools, ones that Naoto herself modified as a kid. They were things kept around since they were sentimental to her and the initial interest of being a detective. Plus, she also has a hard time throwing things away. Same with her grandfather. But she enjoyed the work of being a detective. She found it fun, but now it's an obligation. She takes things more seriously, and even Nanako has to decipher a clue based on a kid's activity. She grew up too fast, which is a sad thing for some people. Despite this, the memories of enjoyment are still there. Her motivation is basically gone aside from getting the job done. And of course, we figured that the memories are still there since, her and her grandfather can't throw things away. After some time in bonding with Naoto, it's revealed that her grandfather's the Phantom Thief. He did it so he can make Naoto realize that she's investigating for the wrong reasons, and is happy to see her enjoy herself after so long. We then find the final clue, collecting all the detective tools and having a girl realize that sometimes you can take life a little bit easy and should step back and reflect on things. You can often be clouded by your own ambitions that you don't see the whole picture. And with this newfound resolve, Naoto now decides to continue investigating, not just for the status, but for the enjoyment and good it brings to herself and others. Teddie is my least favorite character out of the bunch. I'll be honest with you. Not that I don't enjoy comic relief characters, he's not that well written in my opinion. While Teddie can be a big help in most situations, hell, if he wasn't here we couldn't leave the TV and the game wouldn't happen, we'd be dead. I feel like most of the scenes take tension away. It's mostly delegated to puns, quips about bears, himself, or being with the ladies. But deep down, Ted's got issues. For a good chunk of the adventure, Teddie's perplexed about the events happening, since nothing much happened in his world until the Inaba murder started. He wonders why the fog affects things, and then starts to wonder the most important thing, who am I? I feel this is only brought up by the questions he started asking about himself, the world around him, much like a child in that sense. The issue with Teddie is that when he starts to figure out more about the world and the TV, the less he finds out about himself. The first hint we ever get towards his identity, and now I have to talk about Shadow Teddie. Fuck this fight. Okay, it's no secret I hate this boss, but from a design aspect, it's pretty cool. Shadow Teddie's got two forms, technically, much like everybody else, which I call the human and monster forms, for the sake of simplicity. The human form's an exact copy of the normal self, except for the eyes. Compared to most shadows, they vary a little bit differently. Most people just have the yellow around their eyes. Teddie's eyes shape entirely. And if you've been paying attention to the game up to this point, it'll make you wonder why that's the case, or even the fact that he has a shadow in general. The shadow tells us that no one will ever find the truth and speaks in cryptic sentences, which is interesting since the only other ones who talked about only their counterparts and nothing else as a whole. Once we see the monster form, it clues us into something else. This form's a broken Teddie, essentially a giant hulking body with claws, and part of the head shattered, revealing nothing but shadow inside. This part of the design we'll come back into later. After we leave during Risei's story arc, Teddie becomes a white boy, and adventures ensue. We don't get too much explanation on why this is the case, or even much from Teddie till Namatame's section. Aside from him having various doubts about his identity and him having to leave from time to time. After we save Nanako and wait till both her and Namatame get better, we see a sort of depressed Teddie. He starts to think he can't really help anyone, not even himself. Once we get to Nanako being in super critical shape, Teddie feels that he's the one at fault since it was the TV world that got her into this. And then he just leaves for a few weeks without a word to anyone. We actually end up finding him in the Velvet Room. After doing some searching, Teddie reveals that he's been a shadow the whole time, which now makes sense which now makes the other part of the shadow make more sense. It's why the inside of it and both Teddie himself initially are hollow. But how does this go to this? Well, he grew a conscious. Shadows by nature don't really have much thought to them, since they're just baseline emotions, but Teddie here adapted and grew a physical form. Became more of a person because of it. He initially still thinks he's at fault, but we let him know that Nanako's okay, which has him relieved, but he's apprehensive at first, wondering if him coming back will actually fix things. It takes a bit of convincing and a couple more days, but he does return, wanting to help in whatever way he can, getting a whole new resolve in the process. And while I don't like Teddie as a character, I think he is interesting. He's basically a child learning about the world for the first time, discovering things and the whimsy in him that most of us find inconsequential, as well as repeating the things he hears just because he imagines that's what normal people say. Eventually finding his own sense of self in one way or another and growing because of it. And honestly, before I didn't see much value in him, but I think he's pretty fair for a bear. Alright, hear me out. This isn't entirely the most important social link, but it is affected by the plot, and it's pretty underrated. I mean like Mutatsu and 3 underrated, and I wager that none, or at least a small percentage, of you actually know who this is or have a clue of how he's connected. Well, remember that girl who died at the beginning of the game that I mentioned in Yosuke's social link? Yeah, this is her brother, and he's had it pretty rough since then. You first meet the guy when you're assigned to the health association at the school by King Moron himself, and he's not happy to be there. In fact, Naoki wants to be anywhere but here. You confront him on the spot and see that he's sad, but I was dumb and let him go because he was a little shit. But you get to see it either way. After that, you can meet him in the halls and use your stats to try and break down the walls he keeps up. Naoki's deal is not being able to move on with his own life. He's been able to accept the fact that his sister died, but is constantly reminded by the world around him. They pity the poor guy day and night. On the street, in school, and even at the parents' liquor store he helps out at. They let him just dodge all responsibilities because the boy's grieving, and Naoki realizes something's off and should move on from it, but it's hard. He can't move on for multiple reasons. It ends up culminating in him wanting to quit school so he can help out full time, to which his parents tell him that's stupid and rightfully so. Naoki's a kid without ambition and guidance, and purpose with his own life. He wants to know what people expect, and when people only act one way towards him, he doesn't entirely know what to do except take it. One of my favorite scenes in the social link is when you go to Junes. He never actually went there before, but he's curious to see where his sister worked. We run into Yosuke there and delve more into Saki's passing. Naoki getting a bit pissy when it's brought up, but Yosuke brings up a good point that it hurt for him too, and that her little brother should be living a full life. She was proud despite not saying it much, and hearing those words he never got to hear directly from his sister, Naoki decides to change for himself. He's going to be someone of his own making, and be proud of himself in a way that his sister can be proud of him too, and finally moving on from the tragedy that befell Inaba at the start of the game. Now I know this is one of the shorter sections, but I really want to talk about Naoki. Like, I love this guy. It's definitely one of the better ones compared to, I don't know, bad stepmother, or well, unfortunately portrayed as bad stepmother, nurse lady, dementia patient, and all that other stuff. I don't know, the tutor kid's good, but I didn't do that. Nanako is one of the saddest children I've seen in fiction, and I've watched Kotaro Lives Alone, so that says something. You first meet her with her dad waiting for you at the train station. She's initially very shy, but as the days go on, she opens up more and more, mostly staying at home without her dad as he's working constantly, but we'll get to him soon enough. For a lot of the time we see Nanako, she's very reserved, well-mannered, much like someone who also had to grow up too fast to be able to survive. But of course, she has her moments of childlike behaviors. And included with this is her love for Junes. She loves to change the channel whenever the commercial for the store is on and sings the little jingle. There's a reason that every day's great at your Junes is stuck in everybody's heads.
I love Junes.
And I love Nanako!
And even then, it's all she really knows in love. She wants to take a vacation there. She wants to visit for the groceries. Hell, she loves Junes so much that she knows the commercial. She knows when the commercial airs, and that is some dedication. But I feel like there's a more underlying reason on why that's a thing, and I've kind of pieced something together. We learn that Nanako's mom is dead, and it's just her and her dad. A place like Junes is where families gather and engage in the capitalistic happiness the only way that most know how. And, you know, by going to Junes, that's the only way she feels she can have a full family again. Now hear me out. When her dad isn't there, she's hella sad. Then she does the jingle. She starts to hang out with the party on a couple days off and goes to Junes, having this found family with her cousin and his friends. Even when asked to go on vacation, her first place is Junes. And when plans get canceled, she's devastated by it. Yeah, it's only for a day or so, but for a kid like her, that's kinda big. Especially when it's one of the only times that isn't late at night she gets to see her dad. Nanako has it fucking rough, man. Especially once the kidnapping happens. And then, well, you know.
Scared. Big bro. Daddy.
What I also find interesting is that Nanako herself doesn't have a shadow, but the place that she gets taken to is very much a child's interpretation of heaven. Very bright, graceful in appearance, a peaceful place where people can go and rest once they die. It's also interesting to see the things she says about her mother. I don't have footage of this, but just bear with me. She's constantly calling for her mom, knowing that she's in heaven, and seeing this here in this place literally called heaven. Yeah, it's kind of rough for her psyche. Once we start Nanako's socialing, we learn that she begins the questions thing about where do people go where they die, or what's a good guy or a bad guy, and especially, what is a real family? The definition the game goes with, and the correct answer path, is that it's someone intimately close to you. This definition helps Nanako initially form the term big bro. She has no siblings, so having someone like a brother around is like having real family around. But she starts to question whether her dad follows this definition of real family, seeing as he's never around due to work. Something we'll again get more into once we talk about Dojima. Their social links are intertwined, so it's kind of hard. But Nanako doesn't feel a tight bond all that much. and she feels it might go away over time. Two such occurrences happen around the middle. First is when she wants to make her dad some food, but is missing something to make it special for him. So the two leave for the store, and when Dojima returns, we come in after he does. And while Dojima is upset and kind of yells at Nanako about being out at this time, he's just looking out for the kids. This starts to transform Nanako's feelings of not being a real family, since doing something like this to show that you care, only leading to a scolding, is kind of a big deal for a child. That's why a lot of people don't really do a lot of things. The next time is when she receives a paper from school about parent-teacher meetings at home. A kinda regular thing in Japan, as I've been told. I don't know, I saw it happen in GTO once, and I'm like, okay, I'm convinced. But when the paper is shown to her dad, he yanks his collar and goes, jeez, I don't know. This angers Nanako, outright questioning if his work is more important than his daughter, saying that Dojima isn't her real dad, and storms off. We end up finding her near the river, a place where Nanako and her mom used to go to pick flowers, so it holds great significance. Dojima doesn't really want to talk to her, kind of regretting his decision to put work over his own family, so he sends us to bring her home. She's worried that her dad's forgotten his wife after passing, but we get hints that he really hasn't. This is no more evident than in the next rank. During this conversation, we see Nanako about to cry because she's lost the paper for the parent-teacher meetings, and we agree to help her look for it. Using our ace detective skills, we find it in a stack of papers Dojima keeps around. The form's filled out saying, available anytime. I'll try. Showing both the player and Nanako that he's really trying to make an effort to change things. We also find a photo. This photo is of Nanako, Dojima, and his wife, all together as a family. Seeing this, she starts to piece together that he hasn't forgotten. It's implied through his social link that he struggles with it every day. Why he works so hard. Understanding that he's just as lonely as Nanako is, in actuality. This helps her understand that maybe they are a real family, and until now they just had a hard time showing their bond. Something that some families can really do, but by the end of it, you become part of her real family too. And it's really nice. Even when Dojima gets called for a job, Nanako understands what he has to do, and cheers her dad on in the end. I love it. But we've only covered one side of the coin here, and oh boy. Ryotaro Dojima is
great vegetables.
Not as cool as Sojiro, but every time this man's on screen with his coat over his shoulders, you can feel the aura off this man. But he's also a tragically divisive character. And I mean tragic in a literal sense. Dojima's a detective at the time of the events of the game, and he's investigating the current serial murder, while being charged with the player as a favor to his sister. The case has taken up all this man's time, and he may as well not be a character for how little he's actually around. I know it's an exaggeration, but let me cook. This guy seems very wary of people, especially for those he wants to protect. People such as you, Nanako, and many of the residents of Inaba. So much that he questions you every now and then, and basically why you gotta sneak out. He's doing it out of love and a bit of remorse. It's not until the Namatame kidnaps happening that things start to escalate. He catches us in the act of being in the investigation when a warning letter comes to us. He's had his doubts before, but now this is conclusive evidence. He takes us to an interrogation room, and you could feel his anger in you, hiding everything, and the sadness from it too, because he feels betrayed. Mainly just because you hid something from family. He feels concerned because if something happened to you, he wouldn't know what to do with himself. Once Nanako gets kidnapped, he basically sends an APB all throughout the town just for his daughter, even landing himself in an accident. And while he's in the hospital, he likes to sneak away to his room just to see his little girl, even if the other staff hates it. The man just wants his only permanent family to be okay. That's kind of how he is for the rest of the game. Now, coasting off of Nanako's side of the social link, Dojima has been heavily affected since the death of his wife, Chisato. He's secretly been working on finding evidence on the man who killed her. Because, yeah, she was killed in a hit and run. on her way to pick up Nanako, leaving the poor girl to wait till Dojima got the message much later. This ends up taking away precious time that he could be using for his kid, but he feels he has some justice to uphold. This is of course a front since it's been years and you can call him up on it. Dojima's just been lying to himself, and all the evidence leading to the guy has been inconclusive. He's constantly reminded of her because of Nanako. The way Nanako looks and is a constant reminder. It's especially hard, when kids become more like their parents over time, and he feels obligated to continue investigating to protect Nanako. But in reality, it's so that way he can keep the memory of Chisato alive. One of the things I feel gets overlooked is the coffee scene. Dojima explains to the player that when the two got married, Chisato took over most of the house duties and Dojima makes the coffee. He was the best at it and really not much else, to be honest. Even after her passing, he still does it. It feels like he's the only thing he can do while he's still running away from the cruel reality before him. That's why Nanako does most of the housework, and it doesn't help Dojima's memory of his wife. Eventually, he learns to man up and spend more time with his current family and keep them safe in their own way. It's a wonderful story about focusing on the now and not letting the past create who you are, and it's probably one of my favorite social links, period, to be honest. Oh, we're almost done, trust me. And I decided to save our beloved cabbage man who wanted a gun because he felt like it for last. Adachi is a great foil and a great antagonist that Atlas still hasn't peaked from, in my opinion, and that's not exaggerating. Adachi is an interesting character because 70% of the game he's a bumbling beat cop, being Dojima's assistant who's a bit wacky and gets yelled at for being a goof. But it's weird that he's there at every turn that the team decides to investigate, feeding you more cryptic hints about the murder or what the police is doing, and not in a very obvious way, but he likes to cover it up or so. Once you start to uncover who the murderer is, it makes a lot more sense. Kinda. Most people describe Adachi as an edgelord who's bored and wants to change the world in his own corrupted, fucked up way, and that's kinda true. I mean, he says he literally joined the force so he can carry a gun. Then he shot a guy and he got moved to Inaba. Trying to get rid of the people in his way, just having a good time. He sees the world and the system as flawed. By getting rid of those he sees as problematic, he can enact change. But in reality, it all just ends up being useless violence. This guy has a serious god complex and a bit of a savior complex if I've ever seen it. And I love it. It's just because he's a malicious asshole. Now, Golden does kind of help Adachi a little bit, which I know I said I wasn't going to talk about Golden content, but this is important. They gave him a social link to flesh out aspects of his characters, and here's what follows. Adachi is bored and he's lonely. He barely takes care of himself. He used to be a big shot in the city before he got transferred and doesn't really spend much time with other people. He stays home alone and basically eats microwave dinners each night. People expected a lot of great things to him due to his schoolwork, but Adachi walked a different path. He's more trouble than people give him credit for, and it's kind of all his fault. Does this excuse the murder and the kidnappings? No, far from it. But honestly, Adachi could have changed, but he didn't. When you think about it in hindsight, the initial disappearance of the news lady and the social link are connected in many ways. Much in the way that he pushed the lady into the TV, Adachi pushes others away. There's an old woman in his social link who constantly gives him food because he shares a first name with her actual son. Cabbage Boy here doesn't really like this and just finds the cooking okay at best, but then feels kind of weird when her son does arrive. Almost like he enjoyed being shown care by someone else, despite how he might find people annoying. And his refusal of this fact and many other things is why he turned out the way they did. It's his own fault. He refused to change, and that ultimately what led to the investigation team catching him in the end. Not only that, but his letter at the end of the game shows that he can do it, he just needed that little push. And even though it's not technically canon, the one time Adachi does form a bond, it's founded on lies and betrayal. Golden's accomplice ending is so good if you haven't seen it. It's fantastic. Adachi has more than the world gives him credit for. Yes, he is funny, he's one of the best memes, but also worst kept secrets ever. But I feel like you really need to see what he's like before you judge him so. He's truly a misunderstood individual. He's probably my favorite of modern Persona villains, and the only way I came to appreciate that is because, much like the protagonist, I just took a chance to understand him a little bit. Some people just need to be talked to and understood, then we won't have people like Adachi. Okay, and that's it, yeah. Originally the plan was going to be this whole elaborate sequence of things, that was basically a whole homage to Persona 4 itself. I'd have the text box down here at the bottom, I'd have my portrait just standing there static, blinking occasionally, but then I realized, no, that's not really how I want to go about it. Like, either in the beginning or the end, that ambitious thinking is kind of how I got the burnout start in the first place, and that's kind of why this is the end, yeah. I know it's going to be weird for a lot of people. This is going to be the first time that you ever see my face, or let alone even see this channel, but we've been going on for about 4 years, and it's kind of poetic that I start with Persona 4 and end on Persona 4. That's kind of the goal since I decided to just step down. I know I've been really silent in the past few months, but I really just don't have the motivation to do much of any of this anymore. It sucks. It really does suck, and I hate it a lot. Not that I didn't enjoy any of the things in between. I love talking about games. It's fantastic. I love sharing the weird crap or just things that I do for anything, really. Like, that was the biggest part that kept me going, aside from anybody who watched these videos, The fact that anyone would listen to anything that I have to say, or had to say, it's a great feeling, But, I kind of shot for the stars a little bit too much, And so I'm kind of just taking some time for myself, and kind of just doing something for me for a change, I really just hated doing the editing, and the reason it took me so long to get this video done was just because of the editing. That is what took up 90% of this. Like I did a whole playthrough of Persona 4 again for footage, and to write this all out, that took like a month. Or just about, really. But outside of that, yeah, it just took a while because I had to sort through so many things, and that's... Yeah, it's not great. It's not a great thing. I'm sure many people will call me lazy or be like, oh, well, you're just quitting because it's a bunch of hard work. Yeah, it's fucking hard work. I don't care. This is like my second, or probably going to be third take at this point, trying to record this, because I don't really know how much else to say it, but, I'm still going to be around, I'm not going to vanish off the face of the earth or anything like that. This channel's going to still be up, all the previous videos are going to still be around. I'm not going to delete anything. So, I mean, if you want to go watch that old garbage of where I began 4 years ago, then you're more than welcome to. But, yeah. I do want to say thank you to everyone who has been here in the time that I've been doing this, all 4 years of it, from the beginnings of the Silent Hill highlights up to now, where I just talk about whatever. And it just really means a lot, And I know that 4 years isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, and sure, it may seem like I'm doing a little bit much, but this was a major part of my life. Like, truth be told, I took a lot of time away from other people or other things to do this. And it sucks, and I don't want to, have to deal with that. And I'm not very good at balancing things, to truth be told, so I have to make concessions here and there. As of the time of recording this, I'll still be on Twitch and streaming stuff there, but not for much longer either. I kind of just want to enjoy life and enjoy what I do, which is this. This shelf is what I do. It's what I like. And I haven't even touched half of that. I've barely touched a third of it. I've barely touched a third of my Steam library too. When you think about it, it's kind of ironic like that, you know. But yeah. Outside of just the burnout from making the content, it's a lot of things in life as well that have kind of made it a little bit harder, you know, things I don't need to go into or want to go into. But yeah, that's kind of basically the gist of it. It reminds me of the words of a very young man that I once heard once. Distance doesn't matter to us. And even though we're apart, that doesn't mean we still can't be friends. So I just want to say once again, thanks for everyone who watched even just one of my videos. Whatever it may have been. Offered me words of encouragement, saying, wow, this is peak, or wow, this is trash, as like a joke, obviously. Or even if you thought it was trash, honestly, I don't give a shit. Honestly, I think my own stuff is trash, but I mean anything works. It does. But yeah, it was fun while it lasted. But hopefully, if I do ever come back, you know, have some free time, you know, have the motivation to make something again, then we'll see what I do with that. That's why it's an indefinite hiatus, you know. There's still that possibility of coming back to this again, you know. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Only time will tell. And, yeah. That's gonna be it from me. Thanks for the third time. It was nice knowing any of you, but, I'm gonna go probably play some video games. Yeah. Bye.